Welcome to the Take the North podcast on your free Odyssey app. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show on 670 The Score. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune out at Halas Hall after the first padded practice. A lot of anticipation, a lot of excitement. Dan, how did it go? What were your most obvious impressions and biggest takeaways?
Yeah, look, like this is a camp that has been slower to get going than we're used to, mostly because of what the CBA has done to football in July and August. There's just a slower on ramp for players, for the intensity of practice, what they're allowed to do. To get in full pads today, it's going to be much more intense on Wednesday when the Bears get back at it. But they were able to do some one-on-ones between the offensive linemen and the pass rushers. You're able to get a little bit more intensity and action in the 11-on-11 stuff. They did some more red zone work that had a little bit of contact. And so you're moving more and more closely to normal football. And hopefully we'll be there before long and we'll get this thing rolling. Look, like I think that this team as a whole is a work in progress. You certainly see that with the offense and the passing offense right now. There's bright moments. There's some bumpy periods. And you say that's pretty much what it should look like at this time, knowing what we know about this team. But look, David, I think we're there now. We're starting to ramp up the intensity on it. Matt Eberflus promised on Wednesday that it would be double the volume of competitive reps in the team periods, and so that'll give us a much bigger sample size to dissect.
So we'll be here later in the week too, dropping another episode after our practice impressions. You can find us on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. The 670 The Scores YouTube page is where you can watch us. You want to review us, you want to subscribe, you want to do all those things and let us know what you think about the content we're providing. We're going to get to all of the relevant things that have happened the first couple of days, maybe the first week of practices. We'll hear from Luke Getsy today. We'll hear from Tyler Scott as well. Dan, but I think we want to start with the quarterback. And I think that obviously this, to me, editorialized for a moment, I think it's somewhat predictable, the surge of excitement over Justin Fields nationally. You see NFL Network was in town, and I think the hype is going to be as big as you might expect, especially when one of the hosts is a Bears fan. You got Mike Greenberg on Get Up predicting that Justin Fields is going to be the next NFL superstar quarterback, which I think is something that is you hear a lot from people outside of Chicago. Dan Orlovsky on the same network says that he expects an MVP caliber type of a season from Justin Fields. The hype is there, Dan. I worry about the expectation level. We go through this on a daily basis, on a pod by pod basis, but I wonder what you think and what the Bears think, frankly, of these expectations becoming outsized even before the first padded practice.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because I think there's a deeper discussion to be had here. And I will say that I had a conversation earlier in the week with someone inside the building who said that Justin is meeting the expectations of the people inside the building with his progressions, with the way he's going through things, with the way he's making improvements. That's all that really matters is they've set a bar for him. He's meeting that. Now, the bar that's set in the outside world is so far outside the realm of reality for the people that are operating inside the walls at 1920 Football Drive that it kind of blows people's minds. It's like everyone has taken a triple hit out of the helium tank and they're floating on air and nobody knows what to do with themselves. And Orlovsky's saying, MVP level. And I'm not sure what you said. Mike Greenberg says superstar, this year. I mean, there are like 8 stops between where Justin Fields ended 2022 and where MVP level quarterbacking in the NFL is. So I don't know why we're trying to jump past all of them and skip all these checkpoints when there's so much more Justin has to prove. All right, let's start with this. Let's throw for 250 yards in 2 or 3 consecutive games. Let's set a modest goal there. Let's get to 10 career wins, as an NFL quarterback before we start talking about MVP level production. The good news is the people inside the building here, Justin himself included in that list, are very grounded with where they are now and where they need to go and not getting caught up with a hype train that is, quite frankly, David, completely out of control right now. It's completely out of control right now.
I think that's a good way to put it, and I'm glad you did provide a little context there, because I think the other thing that concerns me, and it might be overstating it to say it's a concern, but I've noticed is that because of how many people get carried away in the expectations and the superstardom and how you have to, it's that extreme. When he is making maybe gradual progress or maybe has a bad day, and there have been a couple of them early on in practice, I think sometimes those are exaggerated too, almost because some of the people who you're hearing from observe this as like, oh, I thought he was supposed to be a Pro Bowl quarterback. Oh, he's not going to be a superstar. He can barely complete a pass down the field. And I think sometimes we get too extreme in both directions. And you're right. What we have, I think, is, and I think we both agree here, a third-year quarterback with amazing potential, but needs to do the little things better and do simple better. And that's where the Bears, I think, have done a nice job internally and at least projecting that from Luke Getsy, from Matt Eberflus, even Ryan Poles, of not being part of this hype train.
Yeah, right.
And not being overly negative because he's not meeting expectations they didn't set for him.
Right, exactly.
Got to be careful there, and they have been.
That's a huge deal, and we'll hear from Luke Getsy again this week. We'll play a couple clips of things he said last week on today's episode, but we talked all last year about how refreshingly grounded Luke is on an every single day basis and how valuable that is to a quarterback like Justin, who needs to understand what the day-to-day grind means to making the gradual improvement that is necessary to become the quarterback he ultimately wants to become but isn't yet. And so that's going to be fun to kind of watch Luke describe it for us as we go one step at a time through this process and see where they go. Justin had a really rough practice on Monday. I'll be honest with you. As you watch it and you go clunky, choppy, ordinary at best, whatever you want to call it. You see things happening in 7-on-7 where you go, that can't happen. Now, big picture, I would tell you that I haven't seen anything that has blown my mind from a spectacular standpoint, and I haven't seen anything that is so worrisome where I'm saying, unplug all of the Justin Fields praise and get rid of it because it's all false. Justin is progressing here, and he's been uneven, and he's made some really nice plays at times, and then followed with a period that's really shaky. And so, you just have to again go one step at a time. And it's the whole skipping 8 steps thing that happens in the world today. It's crazy. I mean, David, you can go through Twitter any single night and find a clip of a play that Justin made in practice floating around social media, and then have people interpreting it as he is the next Tom Brady. And it's wacky from that perspective, but there are a lot of things here that Justin's working on, and Luke has talked about some of those. I'd like to start with kind of what Luke told us before we got into padded practices, when he was trying to basically assess where Justin was without the pads on, and was asked a question last week about kind of his footwork and rhythm and what that looked like and whether that was better in year 2 in the system than he saw at the end of last year. And here was Luke with that quote.
I think, naturally he would, he should, right? And he does. And I expect it to be that way. I think it's just when I say that, there's that element of the pocket that has to move and change a lot more when there's a real rush. And so that's playing this position at the highest level, when you're able to manipulate the pocket, not necessarily always scramble, but manipulate for an angle of a throw or anything like that. So that's what I'm more talking about.
So, David, I think that's super notable, because one of the things that we've talked about since last January is trying to see the progress that Justin is going to make and is making in a noisy pocket. How does he operate? How decisive is he? How can he kind of stay within the rhythm and timing of the passing game when there is, as Luke called it, a real rush? Now, we're not going to get a real rush until September, but now that the pads are on and they're going to start to amp up some of the intensity with the defensive lineman rush against offensive linemen, there's going to be more clutter back there. There's going to be more traffic. There's going to be more noise. And so as we're gauging Justin's pocket poise and his ability to be calm and decisive from within there, this is going to be the next step of saying, okay, does it look better than it did a year ago? Does it look better than it did a week ago? And see where he goes from there.
I think that's what underscores the importance of what they did in the offseason, when you have a young quarterback kind of figuring out what he can and can get away with, or how to recalibrate the clock in his head, and when to get rid of the football, and when to step up and when to step around, and when to throw the ball in time on time. We're always talking about that. I think it helps to have veteran receivers who can make, maybe a throw that might be a tick off look like a completion. And that's why I think DJ Moore means so much to this quarterback. And so it's good to hear and to see, and to, that's the kind of hype you do like to see, where, boy, Justin Fields and DJ Moore, they're hanging out together. They're finishing each other's sentences. They have a chemistry that's really good. Fine. Because you know what? That's the shared responsibility, and that's a relationship worth developing. And I think it's one that will help Justin Fields progress at a more normal rate, because he's got a veteran receiver this year he didn't have a year ago.
I'll give you two highlights from Tuesday's practice that sort of showcase the Fields to Moore connection. The first one was early on in practice, and DJ Moore ran a slant and was pretty well covered by Jaylon Johnson. And Justin Fields threw a fastball. Might have been a tick high, but a little bit above DJ's helmet, and it's a difficult catch. And DJ, absolute amazing grab with the hands, just a hands catch above his helmet, and in stride got into the clear. And you hear the oohs and ahs from the bleachers at Halas Hall, where you go, man, that's a big time play. That's a big league play that they weren't capable of making a year ago because they didn't have that type of weaponry, right? And that type of firepower, both from the quarterback and the receiver. Then at the end of practice, at the end of a 2-minute drill that was kind of bumping up and down, Justin gets out of the pocket, breaks the pocket, makes an off-script play. And at the end of it, appeared to me kind of like one of those Mahomes-like no-look throws to DJ Moore in the end zone and completes a 2-minute end of half situational drill with a touchdown pass to DJ Moore. And you say, okay, that's a quarterback using his gifts when the play that was drawn up doesn't work out, and his receiver knowing exactly where to be to make that happen in a scramble drill. So those are two things that are an absolutely undeniable evidence to what this connection is. This connection is meaningful. It should be very significant to where the Bears passing offense goes in 2023. And hopefully we see little by little every single day, more and more of that, so that when you get into the regular season and the Bears are playing the Packers and it's the fourth quarter and it's third down and the Bears need to move to 6, that Justin has that trust in DJ, and he's going to go there with the ball, and DJ is going to make it right, and they're going to move the chains, and they're going to go get done what needs to get done.
1 + 2 = 6. That's the new Bears math this year. You heard something else from Luke Getsy that stood out to you. For what reason?
Well, look, like we've spent months talking about rhythm and timing. We're going to keep hearing that from the coaching staff. And really what Luke has sort of alluded to a handful of times is how Justin getting sort of that ballet-like feel with his feet is going to help his clock, and so it's all about kind of that whole synchronization of all the things that go into this. We talked last week about the Netflix documentary Quarterback and understanding the complexity of the position. I thought this was a nuanced little description of what a quarterback has to understand as he's going through his reads against a defense that's coming to take his head off.
Yeah, I mean that's a critical part of playing the position. I think is that your feet take you through your progression and your timing. And so if your feet are telling you it's time to move on to the next guy, then it's time to move on to the next guy. And then if he's open, then you got to throw it to that guy and continue through your progression. And then when things break down and you can't stay in that rhythm, that's when, the best become the best, And so I think that's just a different part of the game, but the other part is super important too.
I don't think Kirk Cousins could have put that any better on Quarterback on Netflix.
Right. And like I made a suggestion on Twitter last week that series needs to get a QB2 somewhere along the lines, because that whole lifestyle is a different thing. But I could listen to Luke talk about this stuff all day long, because it is very to the point. It is very specific. It is very detailed. It helps you understand what goes on in these situations. Look, David, I saw in a 7-on-7 session today, multiple times where Justin's just double clutching. He's holding, and you're like, this is 7-on-7. This is target practice. It's got to be boom, 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 balls out. And there was one particular rep where the ball never came out of his hands. And in 7-on-7, that's like the cardinal sin. You know what I mean? Either you get through your reps and you take a chance and you fire it somewhere, or you put it, and this was a red zone 7-on-7 session. You put it through the goalposts and you just say, I'll live to fight another day. But after 11 seconds back there, still have patting the ball and holding it, that can't happen. And so these are the things where the footwork and the timing and the rhythm, they all have to kind of work together and move in the right direction.
Let's keep it on offense, move away from Justin Fields a little bit, but as long as we're talking receivers, Darnell Mooney shows very few signs of being a guy that hasn't played since last November. Chase Claypool, from a lot of people's reports, is passing the eye test early on, but I think Tyler Scott is capturing a lot of people's imagination, Dan. In order, those three guys, they give the Bears, along with DJ Moore, 4 receivers that look pretty good early on and creating a little bit of a buzz.
So with Mooney, I told you for months that I wanted to see it with my own eyes. Well, I've seen it with my own eyes now. We're 6 practices in. Darnell isn't doing everything yet that the Bears want him to do. He's not doing a ton of 11-on-11 full speed work. But when he's in these 1-on-1 drills, when he's in 7-on-7, when he's making his breaks, you see no hesitation. You see no lack of quickness. You see no lack of burst. And so it's there. Darnell Mooney, in my mind, is back, and the individualized plan they have to bring him back physically on their schedule is fine with me. Like, because it looks the way it's supposed to look right now, and this isn't, like Tariq Cohen hobbling out to practice, and you go, oh God, there's something bad here. There's a lot of things you can pick up on in these settings, and right now there's nothing with Darnell Mooney that says, scratch your head and worry a little bit. Claypool, physically, you see the connection coming together a little bit with Justin. Physically, we know what he is as a big, strong, fast, athletic guy who can do a lot of things. That the questions with Chase Claypool are how he rides the roller coaster, and so the biggest questions that we'll need to answer on Chase Claypool won't come until the regular season starts, and there's some ups, some downs, some games where he has 90 plus yards, some games where he has 20 yards or below, and how he handles the losing and the failure and the success and the bumps and all those things we'll see there. And then Tyler Scott, you talk about a guy that's been a lot of fun to talk to, because there's a maturity within him as a rookie in which his willingness to acknowledge all the things that he needs to refine and get better on it's really refreshing, and it's really sophisticated. Like, he can have some very detailed conversations about, I know what I need to know, I just need to apply it now. I come out of an offense at Cincinnati where it was pretty basic. We lined up, we ran our routes, got the signals from the sideline and did it. Well, now I'm in a more complex system that has motions and shifts and alignment responsibilities that I've got to get up to speed with. And oh, by the way, I'm very aware that my elite trait is my speed, but now it's a different ball game using my speed against NFL defensive backs who understand that my number one weapon is my speed. And so there was an exchange on Monday after practice where Tyler Scott talked about the sophistication of route running at the NFL level and how he's working to get up to speed with that, in particular against Jaylon Johnson. Here's what some of what Tyler had to say on Monday.
I think I've noticed coming from college to the NFL, is the biggest difference is not necessarily, I wouldn't say necessarily the speed of the game, not as much as I thought it would be, so far at least, but I would say the knowledge of the players that you're going against for sure. I remember my first rep against Jalen Johnson when he came back at OTAs, and my very first rep, he was on top of it, like he ran it for me. And at that point, I was like, man, this, and I mean, this guy's been here for, 3-4 years. And so I'm like, man, this dude, he just kind of gave me a taste of what, really a high level caliber cornerback, kind of how they, dissect the game and how they're just one step ahead. And so that's pretty much the biggest difference, so I'm just trying to figure out now, how do I use my speed? How do I threaten guys with that? And so just using like run plays or, things of that nature, just to kind of threaten guys and make them feel, what I'm about, so that then gets guys off of me. So then I can kind of play around with them, because at the end of the day, it's a physical game, also, being fast and things of that nature, but it's also a mind game as well.
That was something I heard on Football Night in Chicago on Monday night, Dan, and it came to mind real quickly. Like, this is a guy who not only runs fast, he thinks fast.
Yeah.
And his brain keeps up with his feet, and you can almost envision him being a pretty good route runner. That he's got speed to kill. And the more that he spoke, and you're around there more often, but the more that he spoke, I wondered if the comparison, 4th-round draft pick. So Mooney was a 5th-round draft pick. When Darnell Mooney came into the league, he sounded like he was a consummate professional already. He was there from the shoulders up, and then the rest came into place. He reminds me of hearing him, how Darnell Mooney sounded as a rookie, and helped him assimilate very quickly. Not saying that, Tyler Scott's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. I just mean that he may make a quicker adjustment because he seems to have a good grasp of what it takes mentally to make the transition.
Yeah, and that allows you to be coachable, and it's that combination. The comparison is apt to me because you have that combination of not only hunger, but the willingness to understand what the approach is to channel that hunger into getting better. And so those two things with Mooney and Scott are very similar, and you hear the people around them speaking about them in similar terms. I was kind of in the wait and see approach with Mooney as a rookie because, newsflash, I got burned with Anthony Miller, right? Like I thought Anthony Miller was going to be something he wasn't. And so then when people start praising Darnell Mooney, you're like, okay, well, I need to see production. And then he produced, and then he had a 1,000-yard season his second year, and all of a sudden became a big part of the Bears offense. I think Tyler Scott's got a chance here. And I think that the Bears coaches realize that he's got a chance here. And because he is so receptive and so engaged and has so many natural traits, from the speed to the toughness to the cerebral ability to approach the game, it gives them the excitement on a daily basis to come in and work with them. And then it just becomes that snowball, and so we'll see where it goes. So today, David, on Tuesday, one of the reps that you'll be able to find easily on social media is a 48-yard completion from Justin Field to Tyler Scott. And if you get the right angle on it, Tyler Scott's lined up against Greg Stroman, and just the inside leverage release he uses, and then to turn on the speed as soon as he gets an inch of separation and then turns it into 4 yards. It's truly impressive to watch. Now, Justin's throwing from a bit of a noisy pocket, kind of leaning back and underthrows it a little bit, but it's a big connection made in big part because the margin of error was big because of what Tyler Scott was able to do with that top end speed and really flustering a defensive back that couldn't recover in time.
And there again, you don't have to be perfect when you have receivers who help you make plays and maybe catch things that are just in the vicinity just because of their ability to separate and get open. That's a great example. So moving from wide receivers to the offensive line, I think this is what a lot of people were waiting for when you say they're putting on the pads, the first practice with pads. Darnell Wright. Darnell Wright is the guy I think a lot of people were curious. The first round draft pick, the day one starter. The Bears have not messed around, and I give them credit for that. We take that for granted, but they could have made him earn the job or do this or that. He reported in shape. He now is going to be, ideally the guy at right tackle. What did he look like from day one? What have been your early impressions of Darnell Wright?
I mean, look, this guy's not just big, he's huge. He's not just strong, he's powerful. He's not just athletic, he's really nimble. And when you have those combination of traits as an offensive lineman playing right tackle, it gives you a chance to do some special things. Every single day out here, David, someone from the coaching staff or from the offensive huddle drops another sort of waterfall of praise on who Darnell Wright is as a player and what it means. I had a one-on-one discussion with Cole Kmet earlier this afternoon, and he was just generally talking about the belief of the offense and where it is in comparison to last year, and unsolicited brought up Darnell Wright's name as somebody who just every single day brings confidence to that unit because of how steady and sturdy he is over there at the tackle position and the way he does things. And then you hear from Braxton Jones and Tevin Jenkins today, two of his mates on the offensive line, talking about just the elite athleticism. And Tevin Jenkins said that this is echoing some of the sentiments that Ryan Poles had during the spring. Darnell Wright's ability to win when he's wrong is truly impressive, right? Like out of position, makes a mistake, and then is so physically gifted that he can still win that rep. And Tevin Jenkins called it today mind-blowing. Those were his words, that it was mind-blowing. He's never seen anything like it in his career, where a guy can be a little bit out of sorts, and then the guy's coming at him at a bull rush, and he can just steady himself, anchor, and stonewall the bull rush. And so you hear these things, and then you watch it with your own eyes, and you go, man, yeah, this is a gifted young man with a ton of potential, playing a very important position here that gives the Bears offense a chance to go to a new level. We've spent months talking about what DJ Moore will mean for Justin Fields. Well, what happens when Darnell Wright gives your starting quarterback that level of comfort and security back there?
A year ago, we were marveling at the progress and the surprise that Braxton Jones provided and showed in early camp. And I think that a year later, how would you compare and contrast, number one, the impact and impressions those two tackles made early on relative to their first training camp, and then secondly, how does Braxton Jones look this year?
Yeah, I mean, Braxton Jones will even say this about Darnell Wright. Like, I was a day three, late day three pick, and this guy was picked in the top 10, and there's a reason for that, because he has physical gifts that are rare. And so then you combine that with the ability to kind of get better and take coaching and be, grinded to a way where you can be an elite contributor. It's impressive. Braxton Jones, again, we heard from him on Tuesday, David, and was candid with his self-assessments of himself. He feels like he's getting better against the bull rush, but still is very, I don't know what the word is, but self-critical, I guess, is the best word for it, of how he's using his hands right now, and seems to be very flustered that he's not getting everything out of himself that he knows he should be getting. At the same time, you think you see the improvement, and I think you understand the maturity of a guy who understands that it's not enough to be a day three pick winning a starting job now. Now it's about being a standout left tackle for a football team that's trying to go from 32nd in the NFL to hopefully being one of the 14 that play in the playoffs. And so there are responsibilities with that, and there are things that come with that and challenges that have to be met. He's ready to meet them. Now it's all about let's see. Look, like these guys right now, David, are going up against the pass rush that doesn't have a lot of teeth to begin with, and so when they win on reps, you go, okay, well, what's that going to look like against some of the elite guys in the league?
Right.
That remains to be seen.
Darnell Wright trained, as he pointed out himself, for the wide receiver conditioning test, which was a funny little anecdote heading into camp. And certainly you hear the raves about the condition he's in. Have the Bears taken advantage of that? Will they install a tackle eligible play to see if Darnell Wright can provide some separation in the red zone?
Only if Ryan Poles decides to get back on the phone with Matt Nagy from their Chiefs days and borrow some of the trickery out of there, and we'll have a funnily named play, Oompa Loompa 3 or whatever, the sequel, whatever we want to call it.
Those are the days.
But look, like, who knows? He is athletic enough, and if you're going to train for the receiver conditioning test, you may as well try to run a route at some point in your rookie season. The Bears have to figure out how to score touchdowns the conventional way first, but then hopefully that unlocks the ability to get creative.
Let's move to the defense. Some impressions of the pass rush you spoke of. DeMarcus Walker, a little bit banged up at practice on Tuesday, I understand. Also, Gervon Dexter made a good first impression. What were overall the things about maybe the defensive front of the Bears, which has been talked about a lot, that stood out to you early?
Well, look, like, you can see the appeal of Gervon Dexter. It's just raw physicality. The dude is huge. He's explosive. And it's just something that you can't create in a lab. And so now you got to figure out a way to get the football instincts and the football knowledge to match up with what's there physically. And they're going to have to continue to push that along. I think they like both these rookie defensive tackles' versatility, the ability to be able to play nose, ability to be able to play 3 technique, and then try to squeeze the most out of those guys in situational roles, at least early on. Dexter's a guy I want to see more of through camp, because in some of these one-on-one drills, like, he'll win the one-on-one, but you say if that was a 5-on-5, there's somebody else there to clean him up, because there's just less space to operate, and we'll see where that goes. The pass rush as a whole, Biggsy wrote it. Our friend Brad Biggs wrote for the Chicago Tribune that these next 7 to 10 days with the Bears going through a whole series of padded practices will tell Ryan Poles what his urgency level needs to be in having discussions in the outside world about potential pass rushes. Well, guess what? The urgency of those discussions might go up more if DeMarcus Walker is unable to return to the practice field in timely fashion. He left practice today. We were unable to get an update from Matt Eberflus, who's taken the John Fox card and decided that we're not going to talk about injury specifics or injury timelines unless they become long-term things. And so there were a handful of guys today either who didn't start practice and didn't practice at all, or left practice. DeMarcus Walker and Jack Sanborn were the 2 that left practice. Nate Davis was among the guys who didn't even participate at all in practice, which to me is one that you keep an eye on, because he missed 2 weeks of OTAs. And if you want to try to just keep track of a guy's practice habits, that's certainly one that has to be kept on the radar until it's not deserving of being on the radar.
Roschon Johnson and Kari Blasingame, the other 2 guys who missed practice without an explanation. That's the thing about training camp. Let's go back to defense, Dan. A year ago, Dominique Robinson was making an impression because he was a former wide receiver, former quarterback, and his story was well told. In the offseason, he worked with Colts former pass rusher Robert Mathis, who I think is probably a good guy to learn from. Dominique Robinson said the other day that when he played offense at Miami of Ohio, it seems like a very long time ago. And now that it was in his world, the way his body has changed, maybe the way he sees the game. Any noticeable difference with him? And what are reasonable expectations for Dominique Robinson?
Look, I don't know, because it was an early flash in the season opener last year, and then 17 weeks where there wasn't any real pass rush production at all. And so this is another guy with traits, is another guy with potential, but eventually you got to unlock that potential. And that's up to the coaches to bring the most out of them. There's just a lot more I need to see from Robinson. There's a lot more I need to see from Travis Gibson, who's a guy that I believe has the potential to get back on the escalator that he seemed to be on 2 years ago, before that escalator came to a screeching halt a year ago. And so somewhere along the lines, you have to find some of these guys that outperform their draft status, and become starters and second contract guys for you and guys that can become part of your core. Hopefully at least one of those two guys checks that box. If not, now you're shopping, you're using the draft, you're using free agency, and you're constantly looking to the future when hopefully you have an opportunity to squeeze something out of the now.
Great story in Sunday Chicago Tribune by our colleague Colleen Kane on Tremaine Edmonds. The middle linebacker comes over from the Bills. A lot of great stuff about his background and playing with his brothers and getting Bob Babbich's input because he coached Brian Urlacher, presented Brian Urlacher at the Hall of Fame, and now he's a former position coach for Tremaine Edmonds as well. How seamless has that transition been in terms of just the leadership that he's taken over? Because I think on the field, we're going to have to wait and see everything about Edmonds and this defense and the takeaways. His length speaks for itself. His physicality goes without saying. But I just wonder what you have noticed from him and what he is like to kind of be around and observe.
Well, his arrival is not to the Khalil Mack level of instant energy that we saw in 2018 when Mack got here. But there is, the reason I bring that name up is as a compliment, because there has been sort of an infectious gravitation of the guys on the defense to the tone that Tremaine Edmonds sets. Two totally different players, two different positions, all those things said. Tremaine Edmonds got very comfortable very quickly in letting his voice be heard here. And so this is a guy that's been in leadership positions throughout his life. He's always been young, a young guy for the stages he's been at in his career. And he just has a natural command of the people around him. That's not to be taken for granted. That's very valuable, particularly when you're at a stage like the Bears are in right now.
Let's move to the back four or the back six. This is secondary because there are a lot of guys making some impressions early on. Couldn't get past your take and your opinion you put on social media and some others. Jaquan Brisker, who also drew the praise of Matt Eberflus, I believe. I think this is somebody who is if he can stay on the field. I know last year he had the issues with the concussion, but I do think if he can stay on the field, he can be the best player in that secondary because of all his just versatility. But I like what you see early on from Jaquan Brisker, and it sounds like he picked up where he left off as a rookie.
2-minute situation, end of practice today. Broke on a pass from P.J. Walker to Darius Fountain. I know that'll let you know that it's one defense versus two offense in that situation, but made a great interception near the sideline. And the defense was pumped about the interception that Brisker made. I think the one thing that I've seen through 6 practices is, as you mentioned, a continuation of what we learned about Jaquan Brisker a year ago. It's just that the passion is there every single day and every single snap of every single day. And Matt Eberflus talked today about the ongoing process of teaching Brisker how to channel that passion in the right direction, and saying also that he is channeling it properly. And that's a great sign for the Bears, because when you have a guy that overflows with that type of passion, and then it can result in playmaking ability on top of it, now you've got one of those things that jumpstarts and gets a defense that's looking to go from bad to pretty good to nasty, and Brisker brings some of that nastiness that this city loves, those guys, right? And, and hopefully it continues through the duration of 2023. And I think Brisker's also been very honest in saying that when he suffered that concussion in Atlanta last year and was basically by himself in the dark for a few weeks, it threw him off his groove. It threw him out of his routine, and he really struggled to get back up from that down the stretch of last season. Now he feels like he's back in the clear. The only thing I worry about with Jaquan Brisker is, again, you have a concussion history and you play the way he does. Now you've got to figure out a way to make sure that doesn't become a recurring issue. But beyond that, the guy's love for football, his instincts, his want to learn, and then again, that passion, it's off the charts.
Last couple of things. So I always find it interesting that the Bears lost 14 games last year, historically bad season, as we are wont to say. And they come into the next training camp, the very next preseason, and they don't really have many positional battles. They have a depth chart that is pretty secure. You don't have a lot of guys fighting for spots, but one such spot is in the secondary. And I think it's the outside corner opposite Jaylon Johnson. And it's taken shape, a pretty good battle, it seems. Terrell Smith, the late round draft pick from Minnesota, has stepped up, and he looks the part. Meanwhile, Tyreek Stevenson also does. The second rounder from Miami who they value and everybody knows because that's where they drafted him. Dan, I don't know if it has to be either or week one. It might be something that evolves. They're going to rely eventually on both guys. But is that one of the more fun battles ensuing in training camp? And what are your impressions of each rookie?
It's not only one of the more fun battles in training camp, it's one of the only battles in training camp, to be honest. You got running back and maybe one or two others, but these two guys are acclimating quickly. Tariq Stevenson, to me, has a little bit of an inside track here, although you hear the praise from Matt Eberflus about Smitty, Terrell Smith, on a regular basis that leads you to believe that the coach really likes a lot of the things that he does instinctively. Tariq Stevenson, to me, has a combination of instincts and confidence that remind me of Eddie Jackson as a rookie, as a guy who comes out of a big time program. He was at Georgia before he went to Miami, and believes in himself and understands that, like, this league isn't too big for me, and I've got all the physical traits to succeed in this league, and now I just got to get better. I got to use practice time against established veterans to get myself better, and ultimately I'm going to emerge. And you remember, it was October of Eddie Jackson's rookie season when he had those 2 touchdowns against the Panthers at Soldier Field, and all of a sudden it was like, Eddie's here. The next year he's an all-pro, and so you've got that combination there of again the confidence and the understanding of where he's at now, and the willingness to climb that staircase that should give him potential to be a difference-making starter in this defense. We'll see where this goes. Look, like, we've got preseason game action now, less than 2 weeks away. We'll get 3 consecutive Saturdays where I'm sure the Bears want to test both of these guys against NFL competition. We'll get those crossover practices in Indianapolis, and by the time we get to the last week in August, this competition will probably be a little clearer. And we'll be able to talk with a little more clarity about where it stands.
Last thing I wanted to touch on, make sure we didn't overlook it just because of the schedule of our podcasts. But Jalen Johnson spoke late last week in a way that I think we have to bring attention to. I know that you were, I think, impressed by the way he handled himself, what he had to say entering the final year of his contract, facing a lot of the questions after Cole Kmet signed the extension worth $32.8 million guaranteed, and Jaylon Johnson did not attend OTAs. And when he didn't, and he has said what he said, I think, guys like me were somewhat critical of just, putting himself ahead of the team and ask some questions that I think were valid at the time. By the same token, you have to be fair. He handled himself like a pro, his first kind of opportunity to get behind the microphone and state his case. And I love what he had to say in terms of, I haven't really proven yet that I deserve that contract. I'm going to go out with that attitude. And he explained why he may not have gotten the takeaways like maybe Trevon Diggs in Dallas has, and he got paid for it. But I thought I was very impressed by Jaylon Johnson's approach and his professionalism, handling himself in the way that if you're a Bears fan, if you're a Bears coach, that's exactly what you want to hear from one of your best defensive players.
When Jalen missed those couple weeks of OTAs, I think it was natural to sort of attach contract discontent to his absence. And I don't necessarily think it was to the level that the outside world perceived it was. I think Jalen wanted to have some time with his daughter. I think he wanted to be away from football for a little bit, and then he was going to come in and work as soon as he got back. I think he's been very candid and honest with his self-assessment. I think he obviously has a high level of self-confidence and believes that no matter what happens with his contract, he's going to go out and put the best foot forward and try to prove what he's worth, which is ultimately what you do in these situations. But at the same time, as you mentioned, like, Trevon Diggs was taken 1 pick after Jaylon Johnson. I remember asking Ryan Pace on draft night, look, you had 2 of those guys staring you in the face and you went with Jalen over Trevon Diggs. What was it? And going through that. Well, now this guy's gotten paid and he's got 17 career interceptions through 3 years, and you as Jaylon Johnson have 1 interception. And you're grounded enough to understand that, okay, I haven't done the things and accomplished the things and put the things on my resume that get these big dollar contracts paid. And so I have to own that, and I have to go and change that if I want to be paid big money. He was also asked, to compare his situation to Roquan Smith's situation a year ago, and he had a similar answer where it was just like, that's Roquan Smith. The dude was an established standout star in the league, and I'm still trying to kind of earn that respect from the outside world, even though I believe in my heart of hearts that I'm a standout, top tier cornerback in this league. So it's going to be really interesting to see where this goes. I think Jalen has been very clear. He would love a contract extension before the season starts. If he doesn't get it, he's not going to be bitter. His feelings aren't going to be hurt. He's going to go out and try to prove to Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus and Alan Williams and anyone else who has a voice in this conversation that he's worthy of being here for the long haul at a price that feels good to him. And if not, next March awaits and he can go to the open market if so desired and figure out what he's ultimately worth. You remember Kyle Fuller had kind of an up and down start to his career. And I think ultimately the Bears stamped him with the transition tag, allowed the Packers to negotiate his contract for him, and then came back on the deal that the Packers negotiated because the Bears had the right to match that. I'm not saying that's the path ahead for Jalen Johnson, but he certainly understands that there's more to show and more to prove. And look, like, he owns the fact that the style of cornerback that he plays doesn't necessarily cater to getting a ton of interceptions. Well, guess what? You play for a coach who has an acronym that says T, take the ball away. Well, now you've got to adapt. And he said, look, like, I've got to adapt. I've got to understand that just locking a guy down isn't enough for my own selfish wishes or for the wishes of my head coach who wants a defense that takes the ball away on a regular basis. So now he's got to make some adaptations to his game to try to get those interceptions to pile up. There's only one in his career. It was off of Joe Burrow, in 2021, and there hasn't been one since, and there hadn't been one before. So that column has to fill up before we start talking about a Brinks truck pulling up here.
It was good recognition by him, and I think he's an easy guy to root for in a defense. I think he can definitely be one of the best players. All right, we've covered the offense, we've covered the defense, we've covered all that we're going to cover today. Dan, more practice going on all week at Halas Hall. We'll be back later. And anything else that we forgot this time?
Yeah, no, another padded practice on Wednesday. Then they'll get a day off on Thursday, come back Friday and Saturday. And then Family Fest, David, Sunday at Soldier Field. I know you've got your Sunday carved out for a day by the lake watching the Bears practice at Soldier Field.
Can't wait for that. And we will be back on Thursday morning with another episode of the Take to the North podcast. You can get us on your free Odyssey app. You can download us or watch us on the 670 The Scores YouTube page, and you can keep track of the preseason right here. We'll have everything for you as it develops. For Adam Studzinski, our ace producer, for Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune, I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show. We will talk to you next time on the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.